Their job is to remove as many excuses from Ten Hag as possible. That means Ineos have to do their job well too.
So Dan Ashworth has officially arrived as Sir Jim Radcliffe's Ineos revolution continues. We're touching on the club's new sporting director and the impact that we can expect from this best-in-class backroom team ahead of a very, very busy summer transfer session. That and much, much more on the latest episode of the Theatre of Red. What a week it has been for Manchester United Football Club as the Jim Radcliffe Ineos machine continues to steamroll towards a best-in-class setup. Now, amongst the many talking points that have risen their head, we have confirmation that Mr. Dan Ashworth, in the words of Henry Winter, has finally arrived from his very well-tended garden and will commence his duties immediately for the club. It was a tedious ordeal, and it took over 4 months, largely because of the nature of Newcastle and their insistence on making matters unnecessarily tricky. Alongside me today to discuss this and many other notable points is a man who requires little to no introduction, Mr. Phil Brown. How are you today, my friend? Are you well?
All good, mate. Thank you. How are you?
Good. Phil, let us kick off today with the Ashworth-shaped hole in Newcastle's wall. Firstly, just how significant is this announcement for Manchester United ahead of a fascinating summer transfer window?
I mean, it's obviously a key appointment. If you look at the way Ratcliffe has been trying to appoint people, it's a top-down approach where everything is, derivative of the person above them. So, he's a believer that before you hire somebody, they should know who they work for. And obviously, Dan Ashworth is at the top of that tree. So very, very important for United to operate in the way they want. It's also important so that we can evaluate Ineos properly, because it's hard to do that without them having the key people in place. So, Dan Ashworth is now there for the start of the transfer window. And look, their job is to remove as many excuses from Ten Hag as possible for not being successful. That means Ineos have to do their job well too. So it's encouraging.
It's very encouraging. And I think one line from all of the folklore that comes along with Dan Ashworth that stood out was he gave an interview several months ago about his view being the necessity to back a manager. In that if you keep changing your head coach every 14 months or so, I believe he said, because that's, I think, the general average lifespan of a manager nowadays, that you're going from one philosophy to another and you're essentially having to part ways with anywhere up to 16, 17, 18 players in order to change the principles and the philosophies. It's all about a long-term vision with him. And it really cuts alongside the nature of what Manchester United fans want to have with a manager and owner. They want to have a philosophy and they want to have a long-term goal that can lead towards a sustainable success. So he's about as good an appointment as you're going to get for this particular genre of what Jim Radcliffe is trying to achieve with Ineos, isn't he?
We'll see. That will be determined by the results. These are things that are obvious to anyone, that have been obvious to anyone, with a rudimentary knowledge of football. You have to have continuity, you have to build on the principles and values, and you have to bring in players that are capable of playing that way, or you'll never get a coherent style. It's impossible. So these were things that the Glazers were told to do 10 years ago when Ferguson retired. They refused to do. The issue at United is remaining disciplined and committed to the ideology, because unlike Newcastle and unlike Brighton, you can lose 4 or 5 games and still retain your anonymity and not be under enormous scrutiny. At United, this will never happen. Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth, all that who've been able to operate in the shadows will never do so again. And inevitably, when you're being questioned and you're having your CV questioned and your decisions questioned, you question yourself. It's what human beings do. They won't be given, an enormous amount of time. They won't be given credit that they've developed a couple of players that, were nobodies and now they're really good and you can sell them the way you did at Brighton. The definition of success is that, it's going to be something completely different. Can they do that? I don't know. Because every market of football now is exceptionally competitive, even the youth market. So if you're going to do it by buying young players, you have to buy the best young players in the world. United haven't managed that. They couldn't get Holland over the line. They couldn't get Bellingham over the line. They've made numerous errors with people like Caicedo and stuff. So, this is a big challenge. But it's encouraging in the sense that finally United are pouring resources into this and incentivizing people for success in these areas. And they do have a very comprehensive scouting department now, but ultimately this will be judged on results.
The most important thing, I think, in all of that is just how much of the onus is now going to be removed from Erik ten Hag, because up till now, every want, will, desire, and every issue that's going on in the club was lamented towards him. When you're looking at Ashworth coming in, joining Omar Barada, joining Jason Wilcox, I know Barada is due to start in a matter of days. You've got now Christopher Vivell coming in as head of recruitment. I know they're all answerable to Dave Brailsford, and you've got Jean-Claude Blanc supplying his 2 cents there as well. But when you consider this team as a whole, regardless of what is required in terms of achieving results and the necessity of differentials between Manchester United and Brighton, as you've said, it is about as impressive a show of strength and determination for a betterment as we could possibly have seen.
Mm.
Like from the off, a desire for an elite hierarchy has been the fundamental requirement of Sir Jim Ratcliffe. It's about improving the environment for all the staff, for Ten Hag, everybody else. And I think nobody can be truly disillusional to the fact that it can't be remedied over the course of a transfer window. Even Radcliffe himself has said that because of the damage that has been created by the Glazers, it is going to take a lot of
For
time
the
to be able.
3 years.
Exactly. But that said, the principles, they can be installed alongside the new managerial team and the staff, which we will obviously discuss very shortly. But when you focus solely on the super team of this backroom excellence that's been acquired in such a short period of time, we've truly witnessed probably the single greatest overhaul of a footballing department in my lifetime, anyway, for sure. Did you anticipate as much of a radical change in such a short period of time, to have that many prestigious individuals coming at one moment during one window?
I expected that they would change, that they would put a football structure in place because, I mean, the one thing you couldn't do was continue with what you had. I expected they would try to get this in place by the summer because, look, they no longer get to divorce themselves from any of the decisions that are being made or any of the failures at United. It's now theirs. Even if they choose not to change something and it fails, it's theirs. Um, I don't know if they're, best in class yet. If you had have asked me this question before Ineos appointed any of them, if you'd have asked me, is Jason Wilcox the best in class? I don't think I'd have said yes. I'd have said, I don't know. Is Dan Ashworth? I don't know. I think one of the problems with Dan Ashworth's position is this position is now becoming really, really important in football, where having balanced books and being run properly is becoming really important. So there's not obvious outstanding alternatives. Is Omar Barada best in class? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. It's encouraging that these are people that understand football, that are in the football business, but they have to also understand that United is going to be completely different to anything they've ever dealt with before. I mean, if you look at Jason Wilcox, people, they all know people in football, and you're working for Southampton, even City to a degree. You can say things that will never get repeated. You say things about United, it's going to get repeated. So there's certain things they have to learn to censor themselves, because there's even stuff getting back to me that, is not conducive to the environment they want to create of trust, of support. And the environment's the hardest thing to change, Shaun, because that is about recalibrating incentives and consequences. And unfortunately, it usually means a high turnover of staff. So we'll see.
Very much one of those situations that it is an unknown variable. I think the one comprehensive fact in all of it is, with the names that we are discussing, they are a direct improvement on anything else that has come to the club
100%.
since Sir Alex left. We're now dealing with football individuals over accountants, and while it is an unknown variable and there is plenty of things that can still go wrong, this doesn't necessarily guarantee success. it is a forward way of thinking, and we can only look at that anyway positively.
No, it doesn't guarantee success, but you can't be successful without it. It's just like money. Money doesn't guarantee you're successful, but you can't be successful without it, right? So, and I think probably the most important causal link in all of this is the fact that we now have owners that have money, their own personal money, poured into, that's contingent upon the club being successful to get any return. And I'm talking about successful on the pitch. So for the first time in 20 years, United have got owners who have put their own money into and prioritize the sporting side and define that as success rather than, profit as the determinant of success or failure.
Well, let's hope that it actually can breed success as well. But with that, Phil, we obviously have Erik ten Hag and the impending announcement of a contractual extension that will inevitably put to bed an uncertain couple of months of unrivaled speculation and media witchcraft and hoodoo. But alongside this announcement is the impending arrival of Ruud van Nistelrooy and René Hake, two senior management caliber individuals who are either leaving a current role or turning down a return to an elite managerial position, albeit that it's Burnley in the championship. It's still a very, very highly coveted position in a division that's going to make him a lot of money and help to build his stamp. They offer tactical pedigree, they offer knowledge, silverware, an array of coaching experience at a variety of levels. Now, this in itself can open the door to questions about everything from succession planning to long term goals or new hierarchy. But without trying to focus on the negatives just for now, this further extends to Ineos' desire to establish the definition of an elite footballing environment. For me, front and centre, the distinguishable benefit of these arrivals is the offering of an alternative voice, a personality in the dressing room that will say the likes of Steve McLaren and Mitchell van der Gag, both whom are very loyal to Ten Hag, and in the latter, very similar to Ten Hag in terms of mentality, temperament, professionalism, and his tactical nous. Just how invaluable do you see the likes of Van Nistelrooy and Hake coming in with a different perspective, a different outlook, and a different personality to be able to handle a very young dressing room?
Yeah, so to me, it all depends who hired them. Because that depends who they work for. Were they Ten Hag's recommendations or were they Ineos's conditions upon his contract renewal? I don't know. Because if Ruud van Nistelrooy comes to Manchester United not with the approval and the desire of Erik ten Hag, it's going to be it's a fractious relationship, and I don't know how that works. If Ruud van Nistelrooy is coming to Manchester United as a consequence of Erik ten Hag working for him, then he works for Ten Hag, then I think it's great. The problem with someone like Ruud, one, he's been a manager, so it wouldn't be a stretch to put him in the United job. Two, he is such a hugely popular figure with United fans that every time United play badly, every time they lose, his aura is going to hang over Erik ten Hag. I think United should have contingency planning. That's important. René Hake, of course, comes from Go Ahead Eagles, who was one of Ten Hag's former teams. It is a bit surprising that both of them left key roles, management roles, to come to what is a lesser role, especially Van Nistelrooy, who done well with PSV. But yeah, look, I mean, on a positive level, I want to see Ruud van Nistelrooy back at Manchester United. I mean, I love them, but it all depends on who brought him there.
It's a very fair point because you have to look at it on the plus side and on the flip side. And obviously, the conversation of succession planning is extremely relevant, as is the idea of having a ready made replacement in a managerial stature should something go wrong.
But think about this for a second, right? This is
Mm.
one of the issues that United have repeatedly had and they didn't learn from history. When you have club icons, club legends, it can be very difficult to emerge from their past. United found this with Sir Matt Busby in, with their transition from Busby, players were still going into his office calling him manager, and Franco Farrell was appointed. He still had the big office. He was still being called boss by the players, but he wasn't the manager anymore. It's impossible for a manager to succeed in that environment. Ruud van Nistelrooy has a very close relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson. Now, when Ronaldo came to United, he had a very close relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson. What was it? 6, 7 months ago, we heard Solskjaer do interviews talking about how if he didn't play Ronaldo, he'd go to the boss, and you even heard the interview with Khabib where Ferguson said you need to pick and play your best players. This is, to me, an issue. This is where I see Ineos having a blind spot. This is where I kind of empathize with John Murda about when they didn't want to bring him into the whole Jude Bellingham thing, is that at some point the club have to move on. At some point the club can't keep using people, I guess, is the reason why you want to sign for United. If Jude Bellingham wants to sign for United because of Alex Ferguson, not the current manager, we have a problem. If Cristiano Ronaldo is going to run to Alex Ferguson and complain that Solskjaer isn't playing him, we have a problem. If Ruud van Nistelrooy doesn't work for Ten Hag, but works for someone else and has loyalties and other, this is how you have a divided football club. This is exactly how it never works. This is how an environment is never praying for success, because it's all these little micro conflicts. And so this is where you need a very clear reporting structure of who runs what, of there's no sympathetic ears that you can go to if you're not playing, or if you don't feel like you've been treated fairly. These are club disciplinary rules, not manager disciplinary rules. And this is why United have had such difficulty in creating an environment, because there's always a weak link in that chain that undermines the person trying to embed discipline and rules and structure. And with someone like Ferguson, that's a big problem. That is something that would concern me. It's also something that concerns me with Steve McLaren and Ferguson.
Yeah, it's a very, very valid point. Everything you've said there is very valid. It's like the whole jobs for the boys thing that just stems back how many years. And even though there are the questions about how much input Ten Hag has had on these appointments, you have to look at it from both sides. And I'm not trying to
Sure.
play one side of a chain with you that you and I are both doing devil's advocate at the same time here. But when you consider contractual negotiations and his personal relationship with Hake, obviously, because as you said, it was a club he was involved with previously, you can see within the Dutch press that the two of them are still very, very close. And even over the last 12 months, they've had regular conversations whereby they'll speak about personal matters, about family and football. So the two of them are very close. From the Hake perspective, it's something that really came left field because he's leaving a senior management job to come into a secondary role at Manchester United. So you look at the project, you look at the club versus where he is with Go Ahead Eagles. I totally take what you're saying about Ruud van Nistelrooy. But at the same time, is there anybody within that dressing room outside of nothing other than admiration for the skill set that he provided when he was playing with the 150 odd goals that he supplied for Manchester United that are going to have an affiliation towards him over the manager? Whatever you can say about Sir Alex Ferguson, I mean, that's a perfectly plausible thing because he's an icon. And it's not that Ruud van Nistelrooy is not an icon. I mean, we all adore Ruud van Nistelrooy. What he did at Manchester, you're like, I think it's fair to say he's probably the most natural finisher that I've ever seen
Yeah.
at the football club. But is there anybody in that dressing room right now that is rooting for Ruud van Nistelrooy to come to the club and pulling him there because they want to be able to confide in him over Erik ten Hag? I don't buy that. I don't think that that's something that we need to look at. And also, I can't imagine that these men are going to be installed without the manager's approval, having spoken with the likes of Thomas Tuchel and etc.
I think one of the things that they were impressing upon Ten Hag was there needs to be someone in the chain of command. This almost like two different parents. One, has a certain personality and one has another. We all know who we could come to, if it was your mom or your dad, with things that needed an arm around the shoulder and the things that you got your ass chewed for, right? There's just different personalities and parents. And it was really important that you had that balance. You had someone to go to for this, and you had someone to go to for this. I think that with Van der Gag being too similar to Ten Hag, there was a concern that players didn't have someone, the good cop, bad cop situation. This is very common in management, where you have an assistant manager that is, supports you in terms of your principles, but has a different personality. So I think Van Nistelrooy obviously knows the football club inside out. And I think he speaks really good English, which somehow Ten Hag, I think, at times gets criticized for things that he says, but I think it's more down to his limited English. He has very good English, but it's very easy for Ten Hag to say something and it come across a certain way. And I've said this on my own podcast. My father-in-law's from Amsterdam, so I know exactly how it is, right? And the way they use words is a bit different. But Van Nistelrooy, he understands the United fans, understands the club culture, speaks perfect English, and probably will be a good intermediary between players and Ten Hag, because he also understands Ten Hag's mentality. So I think some of it is that. But to me, it's about it's okay if you need to change your assistant, but you have to pick who the next one is. Now, you could argue that Ten Hag did pick him because he tends to favour Dutch players, Dutch managers, Dutch everything. That's lots of managers do that. But yeah, I think that it's really important that he's there with Ten Hag's blessing. So I would imagine he is.
I agree entirely. And I think also it remains imperative to focus on the benefits that Ruud can offer the likes of Rasmus Højlund, Marcus Rashford, Alejandro Garnacho, even Amad Diallo, because we saw the benefits with Benny McCarthy. But Ruud van Nistelrooy and the caliber that he had as a player offers an entirely new dynamic to this Manchester United forward line and the one-on-one sessions that he can offer, particularly with Rasmus Højlund.
That seems obvious to me, but then if I dig down deeper on that, like wonder about it, because you're talking about a player that's 21 years of age. You're not going to teach them how to play football; they already know. And finishing is something that is instinctive. And when you give players time to think, everything changes. We saw this with Ronaldo with his penalty, right? There's loads of players. You see it in basketball with free throws, everything. Once you give players time to think, it's very difficult to coach ways of overcoming doubt, indecision, priors, all the things that start affecting how you make a decision. I think Van Nistelrooy can teach you certain, timing of runs, certain movement. But football can't be taught verbally. Football can only be taught through osmosis, through repetition, through playing. No one really knows how to teach anybody anything to play football. If someone said, "Do you teach me how to do 20 keep-ups without fail?" What would you tell them? I don't know. Stand there and keep practicing. You'll figure it out eventually. You tell them a couple of things, stand a certain way, don't hit the ball too hard. But ultimately, these are just words. You have to figure this out on your own. And so to me, it's like coaching helps at the bottom end when you're refining bad habits and stuff. But ultimately, you learn away from coaches. I mean, this is why we encourage futsal, because there's no possessions, very little instruction. It's a high speed game, and you're not being coached within an inch of your life. So I think coaching has value, but sometimes I think it's overrated.
Without the intention of sounding anyway obnoxious, do you not think that that's a slightly simplistic way of looking at it, and maybe completely it's kind of eradicating the necessity for an entire field of footballing expertise? I mean,
No, 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 no. But 99% of football expertise is bullshit. They've actually created a whole vernacular. They've actually created a whole vernacular to say nothing, right? First of all, Shaun, if coaching could produce a Messi, we produce one every year. If coaching could produce Ronaldo, we produce one every year. But they can't, and they don't for this reason, right? Coaching refines your game. Okay, it teaches you certain habits, but it can never make you a footballer. Okay, never, because that is learned on your own. You can't coach how to perform under pressure. Okay, there are so many variables in the human brain that affect how people learn. their socioeconomic status, their physical health, their mental health, their parenting, their so many different factors that goes into how a human being develops. Coaching, especially youth coaches, uh, uh, one of the worst influences on youth football is professional football, because people are giving 7, 8, 9 year olds all this instruction, which is just total fucking nonsense. I mean, you kids running through with the ball, you think they're going, well, what did he say? Did he say that you could touch here, go? Everything's happening so fast, right? And so you can teach kids certain habits, you can teach them certain things that will help them improve. But like I said, let's take us back to the very beginning. If you're a coach, okay, a kid comes up to you and says, okay, tell me exactly what I need to do to be able to do 10 keep ups without fail. There's no answer. Now, if a kid comes up to you and says, tell me what 2 plus 2 equals 4 is, there's a very objective way to be able to sit down and show how to do that, and you'll get the same answer every time. Learning how to do a skill, we have really no idea how to teach that objectively. We can give you advice, we can give you instruction and how to but ultimately execution, everything's all happening so fast in the brain. If you tell someone, okay, you stand still, you don't move your feet, you bend your toes up, and you don't hit the ball too. Okay, well, what if there's 20-degree or 20-mile-an-hour winds? Well, okay, then think about that variable. What if my this the ball's flat? There's just you can't ultimately go out and play. You'll work it out. Yes, there are certain things that can help you to win games of football to top end, that are based on probability. But ultimately, how you coach a footballer, if this is in the US, everyone's overcoached. This is why they don't produce good players, because coaching is a business. So they overemphasize its importance. These kids are in a constant critiqued environment. So they never learn fluidity. They never learn how to be individually. They're always taught paint by numbers.
Allow me one moment, all right? I'm going to use two different ways to sort of go along this. The first way is sort of in dealing with Rasmus Højlund. We're speaking about a footballer that, outside of Alexander Isak last year in the Premier League, had the best goals to shots ratio. The biggest thing that people could critique, if anything, was maybe not being in the correct position in terms of movement. Now, as well as that, I want to look at it from another avenue, because we're speaking about coaching. We're speaking, you forget, I mean, there is a mental aspect to it. And given your location in the world, where you are stateside, one of the biggest sporting stars in America, in LeBron James, was critiqued for years and years and years for an inability to be able to achieve a winner's mentality and get over the finishing line, until he went to Miami. And he learned alongside Dwayne Wade, who was a winner. He had been there, he had done it. And it's largely perceived that his time in Miami with Dwayne Wade helped to get him over the line and understand that fine line between winning and between falling short at the very, very end. I'm not saying that Ruud van Nistelrooy is going to come to Manchester United and he's going to transform Rasmus Højlund into the greatest finisher that's ever lived. What I'm saying is, we're looking at a guy who, outside of Alexander Isak, had the second best goals per shot ratio versus the top 10 goal scorers in the Premier League last year. And if you have even a shred of advice that you can offer about how you can lean in and get a little bit more with the dark arts, how you can get into the right area with your movement, and where you need to be when your winger is coming towards you with the ball, that could be worth anywhere from 5 to 10 goals. And I don't think that that's too far fetched to actually believe that.
You can teach generalities. Okay, generally speaking, if you stand at the front post, 30% of crosses are going to come to you. Okay, because again, you're also trying to be predictive about what another human being outside of the facts Rasmus Højlund is going to do, and you just don't know. And so when it comes to winner's mentality, I don't think you can coach it. I mean, this to me is you're either wired a certain way or you're not. I mean, psychiatry is pseudoscience. Okay, for something to be a science, you have to have a couple of things. You have to have a testable hypothesis, and you have to have results that you can replicate in controlled environment, which psychiatry can do none of. Human behavior is entirely unpredictable. Hence why companies spend billions mining your data to try to have some sort of predictive model that says how this is how human beings are going to react. So if you build a child to be from 6 years of age, and you can get them to do certain things repetitively, and they can become a great soccer player, football player, we want to call them, 16, 17. The problem is, Shaun, and I've seen this many times, once they get to about 16, they're going through the pyramid at 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age. They're better than most kids on the pitch. Then they get to 16, and they're now playing at a level where all the other kids are playing at this level too. And that's all mental. Okay. Now it's about what was your upbringing like? Like go back to the things that I said. Lots of kids have imposter syndrome because they grow up in poverty. They've got alcoholic parents, they've got drug addict. Oh, they don't have the same equivalency of opportunity because they're mentally not there. So this is like building a Ferrari that has a great engine, great aerodynamics, great wheels, but the driver's impaired. Means nothing. Okay. And even if you have a winner's mentality, but the winning brings you no emotional, spiritual nourishment, what did you win? Lots of athletes are addicted to pain pills, drugs, all sorts, because they're interminably miserable because they're living somebody else's life. So, this is where we have to be careful with this. I don't think you could this breeding winning mentality thing. I see it here doing strength and conditioning with 9-year-olds. This is fucking insanity. This is total insanity. Right? This is like mental illness. You should be separated from kids if you're doing that. What on earth do you need? This is you telling this kid they need to do something for you, not for them. For you. This is the obsession with winning. If I'm a parent of a child, I don't care whether your team wins. That's not a metric of my child's progression. If I sent my kid for piano lessons and the orchestra is great, but he doesn't get to play on the piano because he's not as good as the other kids, it means nothing to me. So winning mentality is all that. You can't coach it. Kids either have it or they haven't. And the winning mentality comes from kids who pursue things that they love beyond the transactional nature. And it's not about getting money at the end of it. It's doing something that they love, that the outcome of that particular endeavor brings them enormous satisfaction. Not how much they get paid, not a trophy, or it's about something inside of them that motivates them to do it. Not because parents are pushing them into it, or not because you need to be a winner, you need to focus on. This is all bullshit. None of this actually happens. I talk to boxers, high-end boxers, right? Many of them who you would know who are superstars in this sport. They're filled with doubt. They're filled with mistakes. They're filled with error. But they've got this perfect. This doesn't exist. For people to accomplish things, and it's a collective goal, to transcend individual goals, okay, you have to incentivize them to do so, and they have to believe that the collective goal is more important than the individual goal. If athletes lose belief that they can't accomplish the collective goal, they'll work towards individual goals. That's why you judge a team by how they defend, not attack. Attacking is all about individual. How you defend is about a collective. It's about doing something that is for the team, not for yourself. And so to me, winning mentality is a consequence of environment. It's a consequence of incentive, and it's a consequence of your self-belief.
Well, we'll have to see how we get on from there. I think we've covered quite a large base of the background. We'll put a pin in that because it all inevitably leads to incomings and outgoings and the necessity to bolster the squad while also remaining compliant with dreaded profit and sustainability. Matthias de Ligt is a name that is leaning closer and closer with every single day, and following a sustained level of interest that spans back to even before the arrival of Ten Hag. Given what we know, how do you rate a move of this nature with the inevitable questions that are going to arise, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of ways to look at it. You could ask yourself why Bayern and Juventus want rid of him so quickly. But the simple fact is they have to acknowledge where United are at. They're sitting in eighth, not where they should be, or not where they, or what they, are going to be where they're at right now. So you're going to have to take risks, some gambles on players, Ten Hag will know De Ligt inside out, with maybe the exception of Anthony. He's done quite well with the signings that he knows. I mean, Lisandro Martinez has been exceptional for United, I have to say. And I think that he's signed some pretty good players. I thought Malacia was a good player in his first season. And Casemiro was John Murda signing, but he was good first season. I thought, Højlund was done all right last season. Christian Eriksen, obviously a free transfer, not really his signing, but I think, Ten Hag's done all right there. And so, it's not a bad signing. And it's one that I think United are right to work on and not be held to ransom over Branthwaite. So I'm not really sure you can expect much greater than De Ligt considering where United finished.
It was something obviously I was going to touch on with Jared Brentwaite as well. I know when you consider both of these players, their background is totally different. Obviously, De Ligt has a few more years on him, and De Ligt has the prestige of being able to say that he's won a domestic title in a league in Holland, in Germany, and in Italy, as well as winning domestic cups. He's a leader. And I think the inevitable issue outside of what you've said regarding why are these clubs letting him go, I do think as well, and I know it seems like I'm just trying to play like advocate with everything you're saying, but when he went to Juventus, you have to imagine the caliber that Bayern Munich have been functioning at for as long as they have, that they would have done what I would hope the likes of Gary O'Driscoll is going to be doing at Manchester United, and that's completing the complete epicenter of due diligence and making sure that the individual is par for the course and he's there and he's ready to be able to play. I do think De Ligt has been incredibly unlucky in terms of what he has picked up in terms of injuries, because there's been two particularly bad injuries that really affected him. I know he hurt his shoulder back in 2020-21, and that has really, really sort of accentuated this issue. But when it's coming to Jared Brantwaite, we're looking at a guy who obviously impressed Ruud van Nistelrooy for the year that he was there. And then he's had a year with Everton where he has looked very, very good in that Sean Dyche defensive system where you're going to have to deal with a lot of balls, particularly high balls, and it really, really accentuates his aerial ability. I see these reports coming out that United are going to move for both of them. And given the amount of money that
Mm.
Branthwaite is going to draw for Everton, I don't see any world how United are going to be able to manufacture the finances to be able to get De Ligt and Branthwaite when they're also working in a situation of trying to offload the likes of Jadon Sancho, Mason Greenwood, Casemiro, Christian Eriksen, etc. It doesn't add up to me. In the same vein, I would like to think in what I said with Gary O'Driscoll coming in there at the end of 2023. Obviously, he's got high prestige from Arsenal. He's a very respected medical professional. And obviously, with what's going on at Carrington and the money that's being invested in there, fitness and medical and physio is one of the key priorities that's been taken over. So surely they can look at the likes of Mattias de Ligt and they can say, okay, he's had his injuries. Can we rely on this group to be able to complete their due diligence, Phil? Is this something that's practical at this early stage of the Ineos venture?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can the doing proper medicals is not that difficult. Now, that's something that's completely different versus a proper medical department that understands how to manage professional athletes and their loads. And what you have at United for the last 2 years, there's been a huge exodus of staff, and because they've had so many players injured, um, and this is really unforgivable. Their focus has been on the short-term injuries that are at the club and getting them back fit and on the pitch versus an oversight of players that are long-term injured who always seem to have setbacks. Malacia had a setback. Martinez had a setback. Luke Shaw had a setback. I mean, this is ridiculous. So it's hard to blame Gary O'Driscoll for that. That's more a consequence of the owners of the priority of the owners, which is something Ineos are going to have to get right by proper investment, by having legitimate facilities that can treat players properly. Because essentially what they're doing, Shaun, is they're allowing these guys to go use their own doctors, which is fine. I mean, we're all allowed to do that. But part of it is because don't have the ability to have complete oversight on these injuries, and it's unforgivable. So that's something that they're going to have to fix. And yeah, I mean, look, you have concerns about the number of injuries players have, and that usually doesn't go down; it goes up. And it's hard to find anyone today that has a record that where they haven't had a decent amount of injuries because there's just so much football playing.
Exactly. And the World Cup back in Qatar really, really affected that. And a lot of people have just coasted over that because the fixture congestion that happened thereafter, particularly over the last 12 months, really, really attributed to a massive amount of injuries. We saw it at the start of last season with this massive increase of like 15% based over the past 3 years with the amount of injuries that got collected. But on the lit, I think it's massively important to recognize the transfers from this point, whether or not they tick the criteria of previously playing with or scouted by Ten Hag, that they now must fall at the feet of this new best in class setup because Ten Hag is no longer going to be held accountable for these incomings or the outgoings at the club. When we focus on the outgoings, I think it is imperatively important to see players like Jadon Sancho, as I said, Mason Greenwood, Casemiro, getting a viable option where we can offload them for something that isn't a catastrophic loss. I mean, you see it week in, week out. You have the likes of Manchester City with Trafford going off for an excess of 20 million. Liverpool is selling players that maybe played for them once and they're earning 20 to 30 million. We're getting about 7 million quid for Fred. And this is an established footballer who's playing at international level for Brazil as well. So, from that particular perspective, as we're in July, I know there was a lot of accountability and conversation that they wanted to wait until July because it rolls over into the new FFP sort of quarter. But are you concerned in the opening week of July that we're still talking about potential departures as opposed to destinations for these players?
I think if you compare it to previous years, you would say yes, but because it's not comparable to previous years, because this is the first season where we've really seen PSR big. We saw it in January, where we had a very different January to any other window in previous history. In contemporary history, where every other January millions and millions were spent. This January, almost nothing was spent. So it's very difficult to compare, in contrast with previous seasons. I mean, Liverpool haven't really done anything. City haven't really done anything in the market. I think they bought Savio, what they did ages ago. Arsenal still haven't really done anything. So, I think this is such an odd window because it's difficult to put appraisal value on players because we're in a new market. There's not a lot of teams out there with money to spend. That's just a fact of life. And the Premier League or the teams in the Premier League are being much savvier in how they go about business. It's so getting rid of players like Casemiro. Casemiro is not going to go to another top league unless United are going to subsidize wages, so he's going to have to go down. Getting rid of the likes of Sancho and what have you. This is not easy because there's only a few teams Sancho could realistically go to, and most of those teams don't want to take a risk on Jadon Sancho because they have someone in that position that's playing exceptionally well. So, Mason Greenwood's a bit different in that he's down to the last year of his contract. I think United will sell him this summer. I think Sancho may be a bit harder, and I could see Sancho going somewhere on loan with an option to buy. But yeah, it's not easy, and everyone's finding this out. So what you've seen in June was essentially a financial shell game.
Now, one last question that I'm going to put to you. I've got into the habit of doing this over the last few weeks with a variety of guests, and I'm putting them on the spot, but I'm getting some great answers out of it. With everything that we know now with our best in class backroom team and the hopes that we have for good acquisitions coming into the club, what is a successful season?
Well, it's if they meet expectations, in terms of recruitment, everything else, you would have to say, a top four finish, and not being a million miles off the top four. Seeing a lot of the problems that have been fixed. United are competitive in games, they're entertaining, and you can see progress being made. It has to look a lot like, to me, the first season that Ten Hag had.
Nice, simple, straight to the point. And as always, my man, excellent chatting with you today. What have you got on over the coming weeks and months? Anything going down in your neck of the world?
Not much. 4th of July weekend here, so it's roasting outside. So I was away last week in Palm Springs on a wee break, which was nice. So I'm going to get my head melted with the kids over the next few days because they're going to be off too. But yeah, not much, mate. Thankfully, my the football, kids football, and all starts up again in a few weeks, so I'll be busy with that. At playing, my kids playing football in 110-degree heat. It's brilliant.
Good, good. And I know you're probably full to the top, but if anybody listening wants to get in touch with you, have a chat with you, or see what you're all about, how can they do so? What's the best way for them to do so?
You can find me on Twitter at Malakans, or at Beyond the Pitch. I've been doing that podcast now for 15 years, something like that. So, for me, it's just something that I love to do. I'm not chasing followers, downloads, all that. I just something that I love to do. I love to talk about United. I love to talk, to other people about United and participate in the United community that's given me so much. So I'm grateful to everyone who downloads my content, who follows me, who DMs are, as you will know, the worst way to ever get a hold of me, because there's so many people that have put me in groups in my DMs. I've no idea they're United groups, but it shows up, one message, two messages, three messages, four messages, just like every 10 minutes. And so telling someone I have a direct message to me, I don't even check it because it's usually just that. So if anyone's reached out to me through direct message, my sincere apologies that I haven't got back to you. But it's just I almost never see them. So, but I do appreciate everyone listening. And Shaun, it's an unbelievable privilege that people give me an hour, a couple of hours a week of their time, why they would listen to me. But I'm grateful.
It's a pleasure to listen to you with that sexy, raspy voice. How could they not? And and for everybody listening, be sure and get in touch with the channel at theatre_of_raid across every platform, and myself at Shaun Connolly 85 on Twitter. And most importantly, if you could hit subscribe and even leave a little review wherever you are listening today, it would genuinely mean the world to me. Thank you very much for your time, Phil, and everyone listening. Have a lovely weekend.